It's my privilege to speak today on behalf of Dr. Harry Evans. There are many students who could be in my spot speaking about the impact of Harry Evans on their lives when they were students at Trinity College or Trinity Seminary. I had the privilege of meeting Harry when I was a student at Trinity Seminary. He had a huge impact on my life. I would say it's not an understatement to say that he changed my life. He certainly helped me understand what genuine Christianity is about and how to live the Christ-like life. There are a number of qualities in Harry's life that had a huge impact on me. A couple of them are that I always saw him as an honest person, a real person, and an authentic person. Anyone who understands the history of Trinity back in those days understood that it was not always an easy place to lead. It was not always an easy place to work. It was not always a place that was completely appreciated by all of the leaders in the denomination. But what I saw in the life of Harry Evans is that he was honest about the fact that people had disagreements. That did not mean that they were enemies. It simply meant that they had disagreements. And instead of sugarcoating those disagreements or pretending that they didn't challenge his faith at times, he was honest about them, he was real, and he was authentic. And what that helped us who were students do is to understand that Christianity does not mean that everything always goes our way, but that we have to be honest with the trials and tribulations that come along, and we have to figure out from the Word of God how to respond to those trials in such a way that we honor Christ. And so I would say more than anyone else in my life, I learned about honesty, I learned about being real, and I learned about being authentic from Harry Evans. They are lessons for which I am forever grateful and which greatly impacted my life. Another thing that I appreciate about Harry Evans and for which I have a great respect for him is that he was not afraid to confront people, but he was what I would call a gracious confronter. I remember one time we were talking and I was complaining at great lengths about the church and how I didn't think the church was relevant. I didn't think the church was making an impact in our lives, I thought, or in our society. I thought that the church had lost its way. And when I finished my tirade, Harry had listened to all of it. He looked at me and said ever so calmly, "John, I don't disagree with anything you said, except that I don't see any love in your life as you say what you said." He gently reminded me of Jesus' words in John chapter 13, verse 35, where he said, "If we don't have love, then we have nothing." That the proof of our discipleship is that we have love for one another. And I learned that day more than ever before that Harry Evans really loved me, and he loved me enough as a person that he was not going to let me get away with having a bad attitude or expressing myself in anger, certainly not expressing myself in love. I remember that day, it was many years ago, as though it was just yesterday, because when he looked me in the eye, he didn't minimize what he was going to say, but he was ever so gracious and he was ever so kind. Harry not only changed my life that day by helping the Spirit of God change my attitudes, but he also helped me understand what genuine love is about. I guess what follows from that is that Harry really manifested the ability and the willingness to listen to other people. The Apostle James says that we are to be quick to listen, slow to speak. And I think that's who Harry Evans was. Even though he was the president of the seminary and later president of the seminary and the college, he was a man who understood that we are to listen to other people. And so even though we as students oftentimes were speaking out of ignorance, we were speaking out of naivete, and we were certainly speaking out of inexperience, Harry honored us and Harry showed us respect by listening to us. He showed infinite patience in listening to us. And I think what he did in those times is that he showed great leadership because he saw something in us that we didn't even see in ourselves, and that is that he saw the potential in us, and therefore he was willing to listen to us and guide us along very gently, very patiently, and to help us understand that we could do better than we were doing at that moment. What follows from that is that Harry Evans always showed an interest in students who knew him. He always showed an interest in students who didn't know him, but who he knew by virtue of the fact that they were involved in the seminary. After we left seminary, whether we went into pastoral ministry or in my case, I went back to student ministry with Campus Crusade for Christ, Harry was also always interested in how I was doing, how my wife Susan was doing, and when we became parents, how our children were doing. And that was one of the great things about Harry Evans, is that he seemed to have an ability of love and interest. By that I'm saying, in spite of all of the people that he knew, in spite of all of the people with whom he interacted, he had an ability to be interested in us, showed great concern for us. I think beyond that is that Harry was always excited about what was going on in our lives. When I was involved in Campus Crusade for Christ, he was always excited to know what was going on. When I ultimately finished seminary and was pastoring in an evangelical free church in the suburbs of Minneapolis, he was always interested to know how the church was doing. He was always interested to know if the church was growing. I remember his excitement and in telling other people about the fact that we had gone from one service to 2 services. And he simply was able to convey the idea that he had great faith in those people who had been students under his leadership. It goes without saying then that Harry was a great visionary. He was able to see into the future. He was able to see particularly what Trinity Seminary could become. Even though it was a struggling school when he became the president, it was not certain as to whether or not enough money would be raised to keep the school open. Harry had an ability and a willingness to believe God that the money would be raised, that the school would be kept open, and it could be a great school for the cause of Christ. And I am a product of his great vision. A compliment I want to pay to him as I close is that when I left seminary, immediately I was still involved in Campus Crusade for Christ, and I was the area director for the Pacific Northwest. We had a Christmas conference with hundreds of college students, and we invited Harry to come out to Seattle to be the speaker for this student conference. At the end of the conference and later into the winter, when we were evaluating the conference, 9 of us as directors, were talking about the speaker we should invite for the coming year. Without any hesitation, one of the men said, "Let's invite Dr. Harry Evans to come back to speak again." In all the years I had been in Campus Crusade for Christ, I did not know of anyone who was ever invited back immediately, as Harry was, to be the speaker for the next year. And so I wrote him or called him, I don't remember which, and invited him back and said this was one of the greatest honors I could bestow upon him, is that the 9 directors in the Pacific Northwest were asking him to come back to speak again because he had made such a huge impact on the lives of the students the year before. And so it was a great pleasure to introduce Harry Evans that second year, to say to these college students, he was such a hit with you last year that we've invited him back. And I can tell you from personal experience, the students loved him. We always did reviews on the conference, and he probably got higher marks from those students than any other speaker we had ever invited to be with us. So once again, it's a great pleasure, it's a great honor to say a few words on behalf of Harry Evans. I love him, I respect him. His mark is all over my life. He has made a difference in my life, and I cannot thank God enough for the impact of Harry Evans in my life. Thanks for listening to me and giving me this time today to honor Harry Evans.